I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario. With grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold, a drill program will commence this spring to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork. For more information, visit our website, rmroyalty.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mish Shedlock, editor of Mish's Global Economic Trend Analysis on MishTalk.com. Welcome back to the show, Mish.
Pleasure to be back on. Got back from a 12, 13-day trip in Monument Valley, southern Utah. Had lots of fun, doing a lot of hiking, trying to get in some night photography and some other things. Learning panorama photography here, actually, I was playing around with, and I think they came out pretty good.
Yeah, that's a spectacular area. Not too hot?
It's higher in elevation. It is in the desert, but the temperatures probably starting right now through August are going to be pretty miserable in the 90s. I don't like it that hot. We had nice 70s and low 80s.
Well, that's decent. Mike, the Brits are about to cast their ballots in what is pretty well a snap election. What's your take on it?
Not pretty much a snap election. It is a snap election. Theresa May took a gamble. Last week it was looking like that might have not been a good gamble. The latest polls, I'm not sure if we can read too much into the latest polls, although I attempted to. We had a big surge for the Labour Party that just like vanished over the last 2.5, 3 days. The lead for Theresa May's Conservative Tory Party is now back up around 10 percentage points. I think that's enough for a substantial pickup. And historically, there's at least for the last 15, 20 years or so, the conservative vote has been underestimated. The question is, did the pollsters bend over backwards and over-account for that? I think it's going to be interesting. We're going to find out. It would be actually shocking if Labor actually won this thing. No one's calling for that. But some are calling that YouGov is saying Theresa May might not have an outright majority in Parliament, and she has one now. So we'll see.
A lot of people like minority governments because it forces the government to be, quote, reasonable.
Well, I don't know. We don't have such a construct here in the U.S., so it's a lot harder for me to equate to that and see how it was. You know, they form coalitions. Depends on how stable these coalitions are. We've seen some really unstable ones in Italy, Spain. I suspect we're going to have actually new elections in Spain this year. So I don't know. The coalitions have been more stable in Germany.
Yeah, I think in Italy they change governments as often as most people change socks.
That's about right.
What would a change in government in the UK do to the European and the British economies if it did happen?
Well, I'm not sure. It would all depend on what the new government did in regards to Brexit. Right now, even Labour is backing Brexit, and the politics in the UK versus the EU are such now that everyone is expecting Brexit, and the politics are such that at the EU insistence, not the UK's insistence, it looks like it's going to be a hard Brexit. So I don't think those politics change, but they could, and certainly if Labour were to win outright, and the mood in the UK to shift dramatically. We could see a change. I don't envision either of those two things happening. I certainly don't envision both of them happening. We'll find out more tomorrow, but I think the Theresa May's governance is safe and probably stable. She's going to pad her lead. One thing they're talking about, though, is if she doesn't pick up enough seats, that's a sign of weakness. But I look at it this way: if she picks up even a handful more seats, she's better off than she was before.
Sure, and under the parliamentary system, all you need is one seat more than everybody else, and you get to be essentially a dictator for 5 years.
Until you decide you want to call elections.
Exactly. We'll have more with Mish Shedlock right after this.
Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
Aven Resources Ltd. is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Aven's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avenresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mish Shedlock. Mish, GDP estimates, they vary widely depending on who says what. Why is that?
You know, I started to think I was getting a handle on this, and then every time I think I've got these GDP models, there's two of them, two competing models, one by the Atlanta Fed called GDP Now, the other by the New York Fed called the Nowcast. And what's happened numerous times lately is on the exact same data. The models are predicting opposite directions in terms of what it's going to do to GDP. The latest job stats was one of them. Now it was just really modest, but Nowcast estimated that the latest jobs report was beneficial to GDP. I think that's quite absurd, actually, because what they were looking at, though, is the unemployment rate fell. Now, they failed to see that actual employment dropped by 212,000, and 600,000 people went out of the labor force. I just fail to see how that can add to GDP. So I propose to Nowcast that they ought to look at employment rather than unemployment. Now, GDP Now, in contrast, dropped 0.6%, but two things happened on that day. I don't have the exact breakout of which is which, but trade numbers also came out on the same day, and both of them were negative. The other thing, also recent, was ISM numbers. The New York Fed Nowcast looked at ISM and said this is going to subtract a tenth of a point from a tenth of a percentage point from its GDP estimate. Now, okay, that would be along the lines of how I would see it, but GDP Now actually added 0.4 of a point on the news. Again, there was other economic reports out that day, but the other economic news also was not that good, and I think most of the gain on GDP Now was due to ISM. So we've got these numbers that come out, these economic reports comes out, and the estimates react in opposite directions on exactly the same data. This goes back to something that I've commented on actually many times, and that is it's not the data that matters. It's what the model predicted the data would do. Okay, so, but why did GDP now think that employment was going to be good, and nowcast think it was going to be bad? Why did one think ISM was going to be good, and the other one, ISM, think it would be bad? That's what we're talking about here.
Right. I mean, one of my real estate experts says exactly. He said there's data, and then there's the interpretation of it and how it's spun.
Mm-hmm.
Why do people feel they have to spin it?
Why do people feel what?
They have to spin the data that they churn out.
I don't know that they're trying to spin this. They're just reporting on the data. They're just saying, well, here's our model. And what they did is they put these models together, they back test them, then they find out they don't work, so they go back and tweak their model, and they keep back testing and all that. What it really boils down to is a lot of instances they're trying to model something that can't be modeled, and they're trying to model human behavior is where the problem is, and you just can't take these things and plug and play it. It's essentially the same mistake the Fed is making. The Fed is making a far worse, error. The Fed has this idea that inflation needs to rise at 2% a year, and so they try and hit that and try and hit that and try and hit that. Well, why not 4%? Why not 1%? Why not 0%? Why shouldn't we be happy when consumers are happy? And consumers are happy actually when prices are going down and not up. So they think they can plug and play the economy like it's a fiddle, and they just keep proving they can't, which is something that any reasonable person should know right up front.
Yeah, I wonder who came up with this 2% deal, because the banks also feel they are owed and due 2% of your income, no matter what.
It's all economic charlatanism. It's silly. I don't know, but Mario Draghi in the ECB is continued to press for 2% inflation over there, and it's funny too. I forgot to report on this. But ECB President Mario Draghi came out and announced victory over deflation. All that had happened actually was the month Easter was in shifted from last year to this year. So in Europe, unlike in the United States, apparently retailers, everyone else raises their prices around Easter. I don't know if that happens in Canada. It doesn't happen here, but apparently it happens in Europe. So Mario Draghi was celebrating this, and guess what happened the next month? Easter didn't happen 2 months in a row. Prices fell back down, and everything he was crowing about is they're back with inflation under 1% again. But meanwhile, central banks everywhere in their quest to produce 2% inflation have now captured 40% of the world's bonds markets. It's crazy. What happens when it's 100%? They're going to own every freaking bond in the entire world. That's what we're going to. It's something that's certainly never been tried before in history. Right now, all we can say is, well, people say that it seems to be working. It's working at what? It hasn't produced any inflation, the 2% that they want. It's produced a big asset bubble that they don't see yet. But when it crashes, we're going to have deflation come back with a vengeance. What are they going to try next? Owning 150% of the world's bonds? Mathematically, that doesn't exactly work, does it?
And then you have the Bank of Japan that is now the majority owner in the 50 biggest companies in Japan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Swiss National Bank is one of the biggest owners of Google. The percentage is nowhere, near what we're talking about with Japan, but it is an extremely large shareholder of Google and some U.S. corporations trying to drive down what's the value of their currency to stop the scourge known as deflation. Crazy.
We'll have more with Mike Shedlock right after this.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're speaking with Mike Shedlock. Mish, NAFTA negotiations about to get underway. A new trade association involving businessmen in Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. banding together to say, please don't mess with something that's worked very, very well. $1.3 trillion worth of goods that flow between Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. pretty well without any friction. Why change a system that so many people say works perfectly well?
I wouldn't say it's working perfectly well. What would work perfectly well is if we didn't have any tariffs, period. We see these temporary flare-ups typically with Canada over lumber. People claim that Canada is dumping lumber in the United States. Well, okay, if Canada is dumping lumber in the United States, isn't that good for our home builders here? You know, so and we see the same thing with China in regards to steel, and we've seen the same thing with the EU in terms of China and solar panels. Well, you know, here they've got these global warming advocates screaming and pissing and moaning about Trump pulling out of the Paris Accord, and if these guys really wanted to do something about this, well, you know what? Maybe and to get off other forms of energy onto solar certainly would seem to be a green thing to do, but no, they're complaining that China is dumping solar panels. Well, it would seem to me that if China gave solar panels enough to cover every house in Europe, and that reduced the need for alternative power, why wouldn't that be a good thing? So these people are not only fools, they're actually hypocrites.
Lunchtime traffic, lowest in 4 decades. I can attest to that. I went out for lunch the other day. It cost $10.50 for a sandwich and a coffee. The restaurant was deserted.
Where did you go?
It was a place that 2 years ago, a little coffee shop in an office tower complex.
Oh, so not a chain.
Not a chain.
Okay, so here, I mean, you know, it's just every year it just seems to go up. The cost of I don't go to McDonald's. I don't like McDonald's. Actually, I've been going to McDonald's more since they started breakfast 24 hours. The only thing they had that I liked at all was breakfast. So bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit, although the cheese is really crappy. The rest of it, the biscuit is actually quite good, and God knows what's in it though. But meanwhile, I think Wendy's actually has a decent chicken sandwich. I like it. But my gosh, you know, you go there with 2 people, and you're spending $18 or something, or 12. I don't know. Yeah, my wife likes their salads, but again, just a salad and a chicken sandwich, and order of fries, and you know, a couple iced teas or whatever. You know, you're up to $15, $16, you know, for this. It's crazy. And I just have to believe that minimum wages are going to impact this, and they're going to have to raise prices, and people have just had enough. And that was the results of this survey that I talked about, and people, it shows up now in traffic. People are going out to eat for lunch a lot, yet less than they used to. And a lot of that actually has to do with corporate demands on workers. People are expected to do more and more and more work, and they're 40 hours that they're paid for when actually they're working 50. this is another thing about productivity that people don't figure. I think productivity is actually overstated, because we're not counting all of these hours that people work on their own time, on their cell phone, on vacations, on at home, on their computers, hours spent at work when they're only paid to put in 40 hours. And all the sports chains and the Best Buys and all of that, anyone as a supervisor level or higher, I mean, these people are expected to work 60 hours a week. They're only getting paid for 40 of them. So all of this stuff ties in together, and the curious thing about some of this stuff is that they talk about all these tight labor conditions. People can't get yet despite the allegedly tight wage conditions, real wages have not been going up much.
Canada, in fact, is at a 40-year low when it comes to wage growth, and I don't think it's any better in the U.S.
Is that real wage growth or nominal wage growth or both?
Well, I'm just quoting the government. So.
You're just quoting the government. More than likely, they're talking about real wage growth. I mean, wages here, the minimum wage has gone up from a few bucks to $8 or something, and we got to push for 15 here now. It seems like a massive big wage, but you factor in the 2% inflation that they're trying to do every year, and real wages are back to where they were in, say, something like 1984. I'm just talking off the top of my head here. But real wages have not gone up, and then people wonder why everyone is angry. Well, they're angry because the wage growth, the income growth, the asset growth, all of that is going to the wealthy. Why is it going to the wealthy? Because they have the first access to banks, first access to money. So thank you, Fed, for that. So for pushing inflation in a wage labor market, global deflationary environment, the Fed thinks they can get away with 2% inflation. Well, the average guy is getting killed by it. The average asset owner, which is those wealthy enough to have assets, actually not average, but the top asset owners have benefited greatly from this.
Mish, always fun talking to you.
A pleasure to be on, and no recent trips planned or near future trips planned. So I intend to be home for a couple months here, but you never know. I'll probably get away for a few weekend trips between now and the next big vacation.
Thanks again, Mike.
Pleasure to be on.
My guest has been Mish Shedlock, editor of Mish's Global Economic Trend Analysis on MishTalk.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Any questions for us or our guests can be emailed to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.